Nikon ZR. There is actually not much to hate about this camera, because it's an amazing camera for the money, but there are some problems with it that may turn away some users. Hello guys, my name is Hugo, welcome to my channel. I'm Los Angeles based DP, and today's video is gonna be about the new Nikon ZR, so it's a hot take. This video isn't sponsored by anyone, but it's supported by anyone who joins my online film school CinePro. So if you'd like to support this channel, don't miss out and check out the school. I've built a platform with knowledge I wish I had when I was starting out. It's got a lot of cool courses, so the link is going to be in the description, so check it out. There is a lot of positives in this camera. So first of all, the build quality and size. It's very well built, and I like the size of it because it's really small. It's smaller than, let's say, Canon R5C, and it's very similar to the size of what FX3 and FX30 from Sony is. And the most noticeable thing in this camera is of course the screen, the size of it and the brightness. Finally, a camera manufacturer put into a camera a screen that is supposed to be okay size for what it needs to be, and the brightness. This way you don't have to use any external monitors, and I really appreciate it, and I'm pretty sure that many users will appreciate it too. From all the videos and online, you see the screen, it feels big, but once you hold it in your hands, you can realize how big it is, and actually because of that you don't really need to use any other screen most of the time, I think. At least I didn't use any other screens for whatever tests I did with this camera. Another cool thing about this camera and also the startup time. You press the button and it starts up instantly. And I really like when the camera can do that, because it saves you so much time on set, and you don't have to waste your battery if you're not using the camera, because every time you're using the camera that it's gonna power up for a long time, you probably leave it on because you don't want to deal with that waiting if you need it instantly to be ready to shoot something. So in this camera you can turn it off and turn it on. That's happen right away. Another cool thing that I appreciate in this camera is also CFexpress cards, and I think that's the best standard of the card because of the price and the speed that you get from these cards, because not only it's important to have a card that can record higher data rates, it's also really important the time that you spend dumping those cards. And CFexpress, I think, one of the fastest and the most versatile and widely used so far. So I'm really glad they're using this format and not crippling it with some SD card wherever. And there is also an extra port, which is a micro SD card, which I think is better than not to have anything. And I think it's for a redundancy recording or dual recording, or let's say if you want to separate photography and video, so you can put images on the micro SD and the video on CFexpress, which I think is a welcomed addition to this media port. Another cool thing that you don't really find in any other camera is 32-bit audio recording, which I think is a must-have in any cameras these days, because it's so useful, the dynamic range, and it's so welcomed to see that feature in that camera, because now you can use all external microphones and not worry about clipping the audio. Another impressive thing is the battery life. I have no idea what they done with performance of this camera in terms of like power consumption, but the battery size looks very normal to Canon or Sony camera, but surprisingly, with that large and bright screen and all those raw recordings, the battery lasts so long. I expected it's gonna die many times while I was doing the tests and recordings, but it never died a single time. It just impresses me how much time can I get from that single battery doing whatever tests I did, shooting different formats, raw recording, photography, watching playback and all of this, and it's still always left with some juice in it. Last few days I did a couple shoots with this camera, and the shoot took me probably an hour and a half, and another day was like almost 2 hours, and the battery is still left with about 30% juice in it. And that's really impressive, because I also have Sony cameras and Canon cameras, and they would die long before that. Sony batteries were okay, always on the battery front, but if you compare Sony camera battery to this camera, it also would die probably halfway when this one does. Another cool thing, and it's probably not surprising, the autofocus, because of course we know Nikon is the competitor to Canon, so their autofocus was always on par with the competitors. The autofocus feels really organic and intuitive, and sometimes I even want to say creative, because it's really hard to explain, but sometimes there are cases when maybe someone walks out of the frame or disappears from a frame, and that's what camera is gonna decide how it's gonna do. Nikon always had gracefully pull in focus to some maybe like a foreground or some elements in the shot that probably like a normal focus puller would do, but also it's not done in a way that it jumps, you know, like in I find it like in Sony cameras or in Canon cameras, if you're not set to face only, the moment someone walks out of a frame, it just jumps on whatever's in there. Sometimes it's not the most pleasant way, where with this camera it kind of does it gracefully. Normally, which a Canon camera did is focused on whatever was above the frame, like trees, but Nikon for some reason chose us to focus on the asphalt. It looks really interesting because it was kind of in a way creatively chosen to focus on this thing, and actually the way it did it gracefully. Another cool thing in this camera is the great image stabilization, because this image stabilization feels organic. When I operated this, it felt really nice because it doesn't introduce any of this wobbling effect. And for example, my friend Carlita, who is a cinema robot operator, he was able to use this camera on a robot with image stabilization on. It was fine with Nikon ZR. With Sony FX30, it was introducing this wobbling effect, so that probably tells something. And finally, image quality. I'll tell you this. If you go in for the best picture quality in camera, you can stop looking at this point. This camera hands down the best image quality in any mirrorless camera. Sorry Sony, sorry Canon, sorry Fuji. Red has a significant influence in this camera, and you can tell right away when you start filming it. The images that you get out of this camera is just insane. The color science, it's really good. When switching to red RAW, it brings it an extra step up. You pretty much get in a red camera in this little tiny body. You get all those nice flavors and nice color science from red that makes this image to look significantly better than anything you tried on any other camera. Also, the 6K resolution is a sweet spot. It's not too much and not too little. Full frame sensor size is gonna make a lot of people happy. The low light performance is great because it has dual native ISO at 800 and 6400, which to me personally looks even better than Sony FX30. And considering that Nikon is shooting in RAW and it's not doing any noise reduction processing, unlike Sony Codec when shooting in MP4, of course it does noise reduction to make these shadows cleaner. That actually makes Nikon even more impressive. And most importantly, the kind of noise you get when shooting on higher ISOs. It's very fine, monochromatic, that looks a lot more like grain. Actually, it's the first time I see the kind of noise in a mirrorless camera. It's very filmic and looks a lot more like noise that you get in more professional grade cameras, not consumer cameras, which it is. But all of this image quality comes at a price of huge file sizes. Although the camera has 3 RAW flavors, NRAW, ProRes RAW, Red RAW, all of them are pretty hungry on media. I did a side-to-side video comparison with Red V-Raptor, ARRI Alexa 35, Sony FX30, Canon R5C. You can click on this video to check it out, and also you'll find downloadable original files to play with. I personally think the best way to shoot with this camera as of right now is NRAW, which is Nikon RAW, in normal quality. This way the file sizes are half the size of the Red RAW. And basically after you just change the file extension to R3D and it converts it to Red RAW files. Although it doesn't magically convert it completely to the red color science. But it looks like something in between of Nikon color science and red color science, which actually a cool mix. When working with this RAW, let's say in DaVinci Resolve, you get all those same settings that you get in Red RAW, which I actually prefer because you can actually change the ISO setting, where in NRAW there is an exposure slider. I believe that the ISO actually changes the image a little bit differently than you work it with the exposure slider. My custom LUT matching red camera to ARRI works pleasantly well with that cocktail of Nikon and red color space. And if you'd like to download my LUT and use it on your camera, I'm gonna leave a link in the description to this video. Also, one thing that gets overlooked, you can actually take pictures using red color science. And for those who like to take pictures and bake in color, that's a nice stylized way to do quick turnaround pictures. And besides that, they also have their photo recipes, kind of like Fuji, but it's a whole quest to get through countless steps to set this up if you're up for it, which seems to be a trend with Nikon to overcomplicate things. Well, later on that. Dynamic range probably was the biggest concern of mine, because some lab tests online show that it's pretty bad. In reality, the dynamic range is more than enough. And it's definitely more than Sony FX30 or Canon R5C, although it's not going to be as wide as, let's say, Komodo or V-Raptor, because the highlight roll-off on those cameras is still nicer and smoother. But you would see that only in the extreme conditions. For the most cases, it's more than enough, and you can easily use Canon ZR in conjunction with red cameras and match them up together, no problem. I almost forgot about the elephant in the room, and probably that would be the crippled H.265. That actually doesn't look that bad as everyone says, but I see why people complain, because you can tell that the quality of the H.265 is very much degraded, but not to a point that you cannot use it. I think you still can use it, and if you need smaller file sizes, hopefully Nikon can fix it with a firmware upgrade, because for many that bug alone can be a deal breaker. More than often we need to use these cameras in long shooting forms like a podcast, an interview, and funny enough, even right now I'm actually not using Nikon camera because the file sizes would be too huge. I'm just using the Sony camera because I don't want to waste all my storage on those files that don't need to be shot in RAW. And Nikon, if you are listening, please let us have log 3G10 in any codec that we use with this camera. That would make this camera so much better. Let's talk lenses, because Nikon lenses is a rare collection among filmmakers, and many of us invested in a different kind of glass, like Sony or Canon. And luckily, Nikon Z mount is the shallowest lens mount on the market. Well, actually DJI's D mount may beat it, but it's not the point. The point is that Z mount is so shallow that you can adapt RF mount, which is already very shallow. And mounts like E mount and EF mount wouldn't be a problem at all. For E mount, it's actually pretty easy. Megadub made an adapter that has a Z mount to E mount, which enables to use Sony lenses on Nikon cameras with all its autofocus and lens stabilization abilities, and it works almost as good as a native glass. But for Canon EF mount, as of right now, there is no adapter I could find, and I have a lot of EF lenses. So I started thinking about workarounds. I have this Sigma E mount to EF mount, and in theory, this adapter should send all the needed lens data information to E mount. And supposedly, if I sandwich this mount with this Z mount to E mount adapter, it should be able to use Canon glass. As ridiculous as may it sound, it actually works, and especially works well with Sigma glass. But even Canon glass works good enough to be used. Of course, it's slower than Nikon, Sony or Sigma glass, but it's not that bad. But the best performance I got from that sandwich actually was when working with Sigma glass, because it's sending all the correct data information, and it works almost as good as native glass. And with popularity of RF mounts, I hope there's going to be an adapter from Z mount to RF mount, but we all know Canon is very conservative and they don't want to share their lens information to other manufacturers. Probably that's why Sigma actually works so well. I bought this camera with Nikon's 35mm f1.4, so basically I could have an objective understanding of true autofocus performance and not to blame it on the lens. It's rarely when a still glass can look as good as cinema glass, but this one does. It's clean, with well-controlled chromatic aberrations, sharp, wide open, and beautiful, smooth bokeh with pleasant focus fall-off. And also focus motor is silent, which I appreciate. And I just love using this lens. For all these days I've been using it, I just always pick it up and I prefer that over others. Let's talk about downsides, of course. Photo to video switch. Everyone praises the speed of this switch. Honestly, there is not much to be surprised about it, since it doesn't really change much. They overlay almost the same, and when you go to the menu, they are identical. You still can change photo settings and video settings. When using Canon R5C, when you switch from photo mode to cinema mode, it actually completely changes the layout and the menus. The camera becomes actual cinema camera, where when you go to photo mode, it goes back to this normal standard photo mode. And that's the big change. Nothing like this happens with this camera. It's just pretty much the same menu. Another thing that bothers me, there is no 24 frames per second. Not much to talk about it. I just believe that every cinema camera, or at least cinema-oriented camera, should have it. Media slot position, yeah, it's awkward. It doesn't really bother me personally, but I think it was mentioning. The same for micro HDMI port. Of course, we all wish it had full HDMI port, but honestly, with that huge screen, you're probably not going to be using this HDMI as much as you would if you didn't have that screen. But even if you do, there are plenty of adapters that you can use, and I actually like to use the adapter from micro HDMI to HDMI, my Canon R5C, and if you rig this camera into a cage, you can just mount this adapter straight to the camera and have it at all times, which actually solves the issue. But yes, I agree, they crippled the HDMI port, which could have been something better. No open gate, which technically should be possible, probably software limitation. Not really a big deal for me, but I see a value if Nikon could enable this feature, even if it's limited to 24 frames per second. No anamorphic mode. Don't get me started there. It's just another must-have thing in cameras like this. And another thing is slow and fast modes. That is so crippled, and you can't really properly use it in high-quality codecs. It shows me only 1080p, and it doesn't allow me to choose the high-quality RAW formats in the full resolution. Or maybe I just couldn't find it in settings, which actually brings me to the main problem of this camera. The menus. The menus, I personally know people who turned away from this camera specifically because of the unfriendly interface. I feel like they were designed by someone who had never held a camera in their life before, who had never had an actual shoot. I thought Sony and Fuji menus are bad. Well, you've got to try this menu. It's so stupid, and finding obvious things like enabling N-Log, which I couldn't find for a couple days, and it's not in dedicated picture profile tab. It's actually hidden when you choose the codec to actually get into the sub menu where you can actually change from SDR to N-Log. It doesn't make sense. And probably putting this into the dedicated picture profile tab would be too easy for Nikon, right? So things like shutter speed, change it to shutter angle, view assist, and lots are hidden in sub-menus in a way where you never think they're gonna be there, where they're supposed to be like in the video settings or whatever, but it took me so much time to dive into this little sub-menus, it's just a nightmare. Things like autofocus. It would make sense to put the autofocus speed right next to the autofocus response, so this way when you trying to change your autofocus settings, you don't have to go into actually different menu to find it. And I was going through those menus into photo menu, into video menu, and there is nothing like it. Eventually, a couple of days later, when I was going through other menus, I found it in other sub menus. So things like this, it's just they don't make much sense. I like to have a clean view when you have your image in the middle and you have all the information and settings of the camera around it in the square. In cameras like ARRI, Red, Sony, you can actually make the overlay view in a way so the video portion becomes clean, stays clean. And all the information that you need is actually around in the frame, so you're not obstructing the view by some settings. Here, you can click on display settings and it changes something, but always some information goes over the image. And sometimes for framing important things, might can show it can be missed just because you have this overlays over the image. So I would really prefer to have a clean overlay that could be used for videos. Nowadays, every camera can produce amazing images. In what cameras can excel over others is in usability, which interface and buttons take a big part of it. Nikon bought Red, and Red has amazing menus and it has amazing overlay screens. They could have used that knowledge and experience to implement it here easily. So Nikon, again, if you're listening, please, maybe let's do something about the menus and the overlay. If you want a Red camera with autofocus in a tiny body with great low light performance, that camera could be a good choice for you. Some would rig this camera to bigger sizes, like building a cage, putting in monitors, batteries, and stuff like that. I personally would use this camera stripped down with autofocus lenses. its strong side is to be small. Otherwise, I'd rather go with something like a Komodo, where you don't have to deal with those stupid menus and you actually have everything pre-built up. For me personally, this camera is the keeper, but it's definitely not for everyone. Hopefully Nikon will keep improving this camera with their software updates, because there is a lot can be fixed with software. So I hope this video was useful for you. Don't forget to check out my online film school. I've made this school exactly for the audience that watches videos like this. So you'll find the links in the description. And I'll see you there. Peace.